Of the virus's lethal strength.
Have you been briefed by the CDC?
I have.
Are there words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control.
Days after the virus hit New York, on March 11th, the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a global pandemic.
Tonight, with the U.S. now leading the world in the highest number of people testing positive for coronavirus.
New CDC guidelines recommending the wearing of
We saw the first case of COVID-19 in Washington State in March 2020. All of a sudden, businesses and schools had to close down. Most people thought the lockdown wouldn't last long, maybe a month. Now it's July 2021, 18 months have passed, and the pandemic continues, here and around the world. The community at Yesler Terrace is adapting to the dramatic changes brought on by COVID. It's been a very hard year. Not only have we been isolated in our homes, but our youth, like millions of others, had to study online. Some of our parents lost their jobs and many risked infections because they couldn't work from home. The story of Yesler Terrace is the story of America. What this pandemic has made clear is that low-income communities and people of color have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. This film speaks about the psychological impacts of COVID-19 on our youth at Yesler Terrace.
I can't believe it's been 2 years since the coronavirus started.
Yeah, that's crazy. I never got to see anyone, really. I was cooped up in my home for literally months. Just didn't see anyone except my parents. This year's been terrible.
I'm sure it's terrible for all of us too.
Learning online was obviously a major source of stress. Digital access is not a given in low-income communities. Not everyone has a computer. Not everyone has adequate internet connections. Many immigrants struggle with language barriers, and many parents do not know how to navigate the internet, so they can't help their youngest children. All of this combines to create an especially stressful and frustrating learning environment.
When it happened last spring, we turned around from in-person classes to online classes between the winter and spring quarters really quickly. So it's been a big adjustment.
At the beginning, it was weird because we had to use Zoom to contact our teachers and classmates, and we had to use weird websites to do our homeworks.
I slowly got less motivated to do my work because it was just the same thing every single day where we just wake up at 9, get on the computer, and then go to class.
I was not happy because I was isolated. I was stressing with my assignments.
For students and faculty alike, but especially students, issues of connectivity, poor internet, slow internet, that makes it difficult for them to be participating fully online during classes.
In the middle of my Zoom classes, the Wi-Fi disconnects and I disconnect from my Zoom class for about 30 minutes, then the Wi-Fi comes back.
It's like an endless cycle basically, and there's nothing much I can do about it, so I just had to deal with it.
My work hours, the 9 to 5 thing, that completely went out the window. I mean, I was working crazy hours.
While lockdown was necessary to protect ourselves and others, the isolation presented many psychological challenges at Yesler Terrace. Large immigrant families with children ages preschool to high school suddenly found themselves stuck at home, together all day. Older children had to help their younger siblings while keeping up with their own homework. We didn't see our friends, and youth activities at Yesler were closed down. Isolation gave us too much time to think, amplifying stress, anxiety, frustration, fear, and depression.
My name is J.C. Coleman. I'm the Youth Engagement Specialist. I serve Yesler Terrace and High Point. It's just been a challenge in general, connecting with people and trying to meet holistic needs of community. Most of the work this far has been responsive to basic needs. So we do, like, if you look around, there's like laundry detergent and sanitizer and garbage bags and diapers, and we do food deliveries and pantries and things of that nature. So a lot of the work hasn't been directly engaging with youth thus far.
My name is Sadia Hamid. I'm the Education Engagement Specialist, work for Seattle Housing Authority. If you talk how this affects kids, because I'm the Education Engagement Specialist, it affects kids a big way because they cannot do, this is not their normal, and they're being pushed to stay in a confined place and not move out. So socially and social emotionally, it's been hard because they cannot get out, they cannot meet with their friends, they cannot do what they do regularly.
You know, folks are just now starting to get comfortable being outside again. But primarily that youth are bored and there's not a lot of programs currently to engage them. So we're just looking for ways to make sure that we have safe things for them to do, like in the parks, you know, healthy things to, you know, get their blood flowing, fitness activities, wellness activities, things of that nature. But primarily that, you know, our youth are bored and they're starting to do things that they, you know, probably shouldn't be doing in neighborhoods, but it's our responsibility to make sure that we have alternatives for them to do and not point the finger at this time.
Well, because of COVID-19, like when COVID started hitting, like we didn't really go to school. It wasn't even the things that we were doing was limited. So I personally had a lot of time to kind of think and reflect on myself, and I'll say that just sitting and thinking is not really good because it kind of brings back a lot of memories. And me, I had to sit and I had time to think. So I was just getting the flashbacks, the things that I really wanted to forget a long time ago. So I was like, I need to go to the hospital, I need to see a psychologist.
What I found out is like we refer our families to maybe counselors or therapists from here.
And then I went to a psychologist, and my dad was not supporting it because, you know, it won't really help. That's what I said, but I was like, okay, let me just try it.
Because when we have different cultures, different understanding, different way of coping, different way of doing things. And when your culture is different than the bigger system or the mainstream, you don't fit in anything that comes through there.
So my name is Christy Lee. I'm a faculty member in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling program at Seattle University. There are many shortfalls in providing high quality and culturally responsive counseling services to underserved communities. One certainly is the cost. So cost can be prohibitive. Again, especially if you don't have health insurance, it can be really expensive. Another shortfall is who we train, who comes into the profession of counselors. So for example, in our program, our counseling program at Seattle University, I think we have about 25% students of color, which is higher than other places, but is not high enough. Again, because we want to train people who then will return and work in their own communities. That's a much stronger and more culturally adaptive way to provide counseling services. So that's another thing, is training more counselors of color, training counselors with different gender identities, with different nationalities who speak different languages so that they can provide services in different languages. So that's a really important part as well. And then the third thing I would say is where is counseling physically available for people? So if a counseling clinic who has somebody who you would feel comfortable with, but they're working way across town, that might not still be accessible for you. So making sure that there are counseling services available where people can get to them, or providing counseling services through telehealth platforms, so video conferencing, that can make it much more accessible as well.
We have confronted many different kinds of loss over the past year. Some of us have lost loved ones, others suffered health issues because of COVID. We also lost the interaction we had with our friends, schoolmates, and relatives. As we look back at the last 18 months, we should reflect on and take time to grieve our losses.
I lost a lot of my friends my junior year.
Time with my family.
The chance to say goodbye to 2 graduating classes of students.
Motivation.
It's a whole year of time with my family.
My junior year of my friends.
The chance to be with people that I work with in person, and I really miss that. I'm looking forward to hopefully doing that in the fall.
While making this film, we've learned about the many changes and challenges faced by our community during the pandemic. Not surprisingly, COVID highlighted economical and racial inequalities that have always existed. Issues such as digital access and literacy, culturally appropriate psychological services, youth educational programs, and access to space for youth throughout Yesler Terrace have always presented challenges. We should recognize the interconnectivities of these issues in relation to the mental well-being of Yesler Terrace residents. But we've also learned about the strength and resilience of our community. Over the past year, we did not give up. As society recovers from the pandemic, we see an opportunity for our area stakeholders such as Park and Recreation, Seattle Housing Authorities, Seattle University, and other non-profit entities to work with the youth and families at Yesler Terrace. Together, we can creatively address these and other issues towards a better than ever Yesler community.
COVID has presented so many challenges to our community. However, a central theme we wanted to focus on was digital equity, a problem that has been prevalent in this community for years. It has only just now been addressed due to the pandemic and its recent effects on education and the workplace.
There are many reasons why access to the internet is essential in today's society, but an internet connection alone is not enough. You need a computer that is new enough to handle online applications, and more importantly, people need to know how to use the computer and the internet. This can be a major challenge for immigrants and those who do not speak English.
This past year during the pandemic, we've seen countless challenges at Yesler Terrace regarding digital access and knowledge. It has been especially tough on young students who had to take classes online. Ronnie Bell, the principal of Bailey Gassard Elementary School near Yesler Terrace, told us a little about how this past year has impacted students at the elementary school.
My goal is to make sure that every kid has a device. Every kid has earphones. Every kid has access to internet at home. You know, some of our families do, even some of our families in low income housing do, and some of them don't. So, and again, that goes back to leveling the playing field. Other demographics, they don't have that struggle, you know, but again, I look at it as not being a barrier, because if whatever's needed, you know, we make sure it happens, that we level the playing field. If a kid on the other side of the demographic has a laptop, this kid is going to have one too. If they have the AirPod, this child is going to have one too, you know, and that speaks volume, you know, especially when it comes to education.
Hello, my name is Ilham Mohammed.
Hi, my name is Leah. I am 17 years old and I am an intern at program and MMRTI.
To make this film, we've spoken with several Seattle Housing Authority representatives and area stakeholders to learn more about what digital equity means and about how we can accomplish that goal. In response to the needs of the community at Yesler Terrace, SHA created a new position, Digital Equity Coordinator. Asfaha Lamlam is the lead SHA representative for this new office.
Before COVID-19, there was a digital divide. There was a digital equity issues everywhere. So people who have high education, people who have high income, they have the skills, the means to buy, to use technology. So they are always ahead. But low income, people of color, and immigrants and refugees were lacking behind. So digital equity means we want to make sure everyone who lives, not only in Yes Letters, but everywhere in public housing residents, have access to a working or decent laptop, desktop, iPad, good connection or a broadband connection, and the skills to use it. So that's where we are working when we say digital equity.
But there are also other resources at Yesler Terrace that have been essential this past year to help the community.
MMRTI is a youth-focused program. It is non-profit, 501c3. Means it is not for a specific ethnic group or community. It's for everyone. If anyone wants to use a computer lab here, they can, it is accessible. It's more of community topics based on, for example, social justice, gentrification, health, youth violence. That's based on those programs, so we can engage young people to learn about what's going on in the community.
We need to consider how to help the community moving forward based on what we learned this past year. One enlightened solution that resulted from a collaborative effort between MMRTI and SHA is the Digital Navigators program. This innovative program has engaged over 60 families during the pandemic, helping with internet access and teaching families how to navigate the online world.
We started it on November 2020. A lot of people had problems navigating through the internet, and that was the only thing for schools, at work, for anything. You only have to use online stuff because there was no any in-person contact. But a lot of people had hard time, especially minorities and immigrants who have language barriers, and minorities who have problems, financially to get internet or devices. And there was a lot of people who didn't know how to use their devices even though they have one. So there was multiple problems we wanted to solve.
We have about 60 individuals actually at the end of the last year, but this year, in addition to that, we would like to serve about 120 residents just to make sure they have internet access. So digital equity is very important. And as a navigator, we hope you guys, especially young people, you can help your community.
But what other actions should we take, and what should we consider to ensure a more equitable digital landscape? It's important to note that in 2020, while the community center at Yesler Terrace was in lockdown because of COVID, we learned that one of the essential resources, RecTech, will not be coming back. The Association Recreational Council, a division of Parks and Recreation, has chosen to permanently close the computer center. Before he worked for SHA, Asfaha Lamlam was the director of RecTech at Yesler Terrace.
So I used to work for Associated Recreation Council on an organization called RecTech for almost 20 years, and I work at Yesler Community Center. We used to have a computer lab there, so that's where I work and served a lot of public housing residents, especially at Yesler and around Yesler. So when it comes to digital equity, we program was started funded through Seattle Housing, City of Seattle, and Parks and Recreation about year 2000, and we created a computer lab, and that computer lab was one of the main centers for Yesler Terrace residents to come to learn technology skills, use computers, printing, scanning, and we used to have programming for use. Like programs that you guys doing. It started in 2012 at Yesler, or RecTech. We started the program Yesler Use Media Yesler Summer Use Media Program for Yesler high school students, and it's going strong, and this is our 11th year. So 11th or 9th, 10th year. So when we started around 17, 18 years ago, most people didn't have computers at home. Most people come to use computers or technology at the computer lab. Now a lot of people have laptops, desktops at home. They may not have the fast internet they want. They may not have the skills to use it some places, but it's much better when you compare it to 15, 20 years ago. But still, it's a big problem.
As Asfahan mentions, youth programming was an essential aspect of RecTech. Also, community members came to RecTech when they needed help involving digital access, accessibility, and navigating job applications and other necessities. So when we spoke with JC Coleman, who is the Youth Outreach Coordinator for SHA, we asked JC to speak about youth programs and digital equity at Yesler Terrace. We discovered that this past year in isolation was really tough on the youth of Yesler Terrace.
It's challenging because prior to COVID, there still didn't exist like a healthy ecosystem or spaces where youth could just walk into and be engaged and feel safe, feel welcome. For the first several months, I don't even think I talked to any young people. It was just about, delivering those basic needs and services, collaborating with our peers to look at the intersections of our work and start to plan how we were going to serve youth this summer. So going forward, I think a lot of people are going to explore how we can continue virtually, but it also highlights the need for universal Wi-Fi and ensuring that we have one-to-one tech in our schools. Youth were coming up to me already saying, what programs are we going to do? When are we going to go out? So there is some excitement and some familiarity.
What do we need to achieve digital equity at Yesler Terrace? Shouldn't we strive to have more creative community makerspaces to replace RecTech? Shouldn't we increase funding for youth programming that focuses on digital access and knowledge?
Hi.
My name's Ben Black, and I'm a resident here at Yesler Terrace. I live in Raven Terrace, and I am a singer-songwriter. I write music and make recordings, and I've worked in the jazz world. I also like to write poetry and dance and just be creative.
I'm one of the co-chairs for the Alliance for COVID Response, and on the board for the Coalition of Immigrants, Refugees, and Communities of Color.
It was, the first word that came in was I felt that it was stressful, because just living in the city, I think there's a lot of stress. Things were getting kind of faster and faster. And I did feel quite resourced with community and seeing people face to face and family. I felt like I was a lot more connected in person with people. Well, kind of like when we started going into the period of the pandemic, I started feeling more isolated and disconnected. Yeah, but then after the first year, I started connecting more with my neighbors, and actually I got way more closer to my neighbors.
Well, things you couldn't do, was just kind of go out and hang out, with some friends, go watch a baseball game, or, go to, someplace and, play pool, or, something like that. Just a lot of social activities and interaction. Even now, I'm not a big fan of going to, crowded spaces. Whereas before, I was always on the road, jetting around, driving from here to there, to this meeting and that meeting, and talking with people in person. Now it's, 50% on the phone and 40% Zoom and, texting and whatever else.
I could go wherever, and I could go out whenever I wanted to, with no masks, no restrictions to what I wear on my face. I could go out with anyone I wanted to and not have to worry about, you know, getting sick, or the person I'm with having being asymptomatic and having COVID and me not knowing, and all those like worries and stressors that I have now before I didn't have them.
Well, I work at MMRTI, which is a youth program. So when COVID came, there wasn't much of things to do, you know, because everything was, we have to move, we have to be 6 feet apart. We should sanitize everything, we should be sanitized and all. So yeah, it was kind of hard to come here and do your work, because even like there was like, you know, rules for it, like do that, do that, do that to keep everyone safe. So even though I was coming to work, it was kind of hard. I had to be careful about everything when I was coming. So I did not like lose my job. It was more of like I had to come less than before because of COVID.
I felt depressed, definitely. I felt sad around it, sad not being able to see my family like I usually did. And I think I got anxiety too from it, definitely. Felt that, yeah. I felt like it affected me negatively at first, because it's like a lot of performance opportunities closed down. But then all of this stuff opened up. I noticed like that people were doing a lot of things creatively online. And then also I was able to, because of COVID-19, I was able to, I did this online coaching program for creative people, and I was able to launch a GoFundMe and I did a fundraiser and launched the money for my new CD. I was able to get the CD out because of COVID. Wow. It was very interesting. Yeah, it did inspire me, because then I ended up getting COVID and I got really sick. And when I was, you know, going through that, being ill, it opened up more creativity in me too, and I started writing more music. Because sometimes like art can come out of great pain. I mean, a lot of great art comes out of pain, and it can come out of joy too, but it was like getting sick with COVID, it gave me a whole even deeper experience for my music and my art.
Just the stress of like, I might get sick, and then I might get my family members sick, I might get my mom sick, and you know, and I don't want her to get sick. And then I have other family members like my grandmother and my cousins who I see, and I would never want them to get sick either. And those are the stressors of like, who am I hanging out with? Do they know who they're hanging out with? And like, if other people, the people I'm hanging out with are, you know, just like, who is everyone with? And is anyone sick? And I have to worry about that because of the people that I am around.
Well, as we all know, when COVID came, everything became quarantined. Everyone was at their houses. So yeah, things that changed was I was isolated from many things, from my friends, from the people that I want to talk to, you know, the people that, sometimes from my work too, I was isolated from there. So yeah, it was a bit of isolation, which made it hard for me.
I think I lost some of my, I want to say my naive nature, and I also lost some friends, because it's like everything got very polarized with you know, the different camps and the truth, and you know, what's right and what's wrong. People got really I think stressed out. So I lost some friendships, but then one of the friendships came back, and you know, and we not only had COVID-19, I mean, we were having the you know, racial reckoning in the United States, all of the stuff that happened with Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. I mean, it was like, I feel like we're living through this historical, really enriching time that's kind of amazing. And so I think COVID was just a metaphor for all these other societal ills that got really exposed. Like all this light came in and it's like, whoa, I mean, we're having problems with healthcare, we're having problems with systemic racism, with the environment, and I think one of the things I lost too, for me, I mean, I'm a lot older than you, I kind of lost my trust in the government. And kind of I call it the medical industrial media establishment, because I got really concerned from my view when I started seeing a lot of stuff being suppressed. And like people like, no, you can't say that, you can't say that. And it's like, there's one way to look at COVID, it's this way, and do what we tell you. That's kind of where I got a little like concerned. Because I know that the truth is multidimensional. There's all different pieces to the truth, and not the government doesn't have the whole truth. I mean, we all have a piece of it. And what bothered me was people getting shut down. And then really on social media, like anyone that was trying to say something different, just silenced. It's like, no, you can't say it.
The parts that stressed me the most about COVID was I got it. And I was sick, and I'm not a real sickly kind of guy. Once every 3 or 4 years, maybe I'll catch a cold. But this laid me out for a couple of days. My wife got mad and said, you got to go to the doctor. I ended up in the emergency room and getting saline solutions and medicine and so on and so forth. And then I went home for another 2 weeks. And then it was another week before they cleared me to go back to work. The good news is, during that time, the company said, if you got COVID, you're on sick leave, so you won't lose any money. But, still, I was pretty sick. And, it took a while to recover. And even after I had recovered and got cleared to go back to work, I was a little hesitant. I took an extra week. And when I did go back to work, I was tired. I was just, boom, I got home, I got off work, and I'd just go crash. My wife got it after me, so she stayed home for. She just had a little bit, so she only stayed home maybe 2 weeks, but it impacted her. I've got friends that lost several family members. One friend of mine lost 3 brothers and sisters, something like that, in Louisiana. He lives here, but his family's from Louisiana, and he lost 3 brothers and sisters. I'm not sure what the number, not brothers, sisters. But, so obviously it really impacted him, and other people have had 1 or 2, it just kind of varies. I've been reasonably lucky that, my immediate family, my wife and I, and my brothers and sisters, he never got it, neither did my sister for that matter, but, or my mother. But, extended family, some of them had it, but, it was just minor, and others didn't have it at all. So, it was very fortunate.
For the most part, all of my friends I had to talk to over the internet, and I couldn't see them in person. And even when I could go back to school with masks on, I didn't, because I was scared of getting sick. So even while my friends were in person and they were seeing each other and talking to each other, I was still online. And I still had to communicate to them over the internet. And it felt a bit isolating and a bit lonely when, they have like photos and videos of each other in person, and I'm still like at home, sat in my seat, like looking at my computer. So, it was really isolating and lonely to be at home because of my worries.
Oh yeah, it was really stressful. So it was really hard for me to be 6 feet apart from the others. I would just come and try to say hi to them, like handshake, and they're like, whoa, 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 move back. Because it was COVID, I was like, oh yeah, sorry. And then I had to move back. So these things were kind of stressful. I was like, okay, I'm a social person, but I need to, keep my place, because I don't want others to get sick because of me. And I don't want to make them uncomfortable because of me, Because, sometimes when you get closer to them and you try to say hi to them or anything, they won't say anything to you, but they might be feeling uncomfortable. So I was like, I need to be more cautious, of these things. So that was that was giving me a bit more stress, you know.
I know I got sick, and then I went and got a test, and it said that I was quarantined, and I did have to go up to the emergency room at one point, and then I was, quarantined, and my neighbors were really wonderful, like bringing me food, and my sister came and helped, and just the community really helped. It was such a blessing. Definitely there were spiritual things with the spiritual community that I felt connected to that I couldn't do because of COVID, and still that some of that is still happening because of like the mandates, and you know, everyone's doing it a little differently. So there were a lot of things. You couldn't go to church. You know, the churches were closed down, and felt depressed and disconnected, and just, I mean, I was grateful for all of the online stuff. The online stuff was actually miraculous, what I've experienced through technology, and how I was able to connect with people all over the world, and, you know, go to different support groups and hear people talk and speak and meditation online. But it got isolating because the human contact is so important. It helped me so much. I went to so many online meditation retreats. There's a Zen temple called Choboji. It's a Zen Buddhist temple up on Beacon Hill, and they offered all of their meditation, most of it online. So I was able to do like little 3-day retreats online, and they made it accessible for everybody.
The importance of personal interaction. I was watching something, was it this morning or last night? I don't know, something about how important it is to get a hug. You know, and we don't get to do that. I mean, you know, you just really don't. You know, you don't really even shake hands anymore. You do the fist bump, or you just wave at each other. You know, but that personal interaction, and like you said, just sitting down with people one-on-one, you know, I don't want to say for long periods of time, but, you know, after the meetings, you know, we'd hang out for an hour, you know, just kind of talking or standing out in the parking lot and those kinds of things. Well, you're Zooming.
Speaking culturally, I think it did affect it a little bit, as, you know, for cultural things like New Year's, Chinese New Year, we used to gather up like all the family members that we could to go to my grandma's house, which is quite small. She has quite a small apartment. And so when COVID came, we didn't do that. And we didn't do any of the celebrations that we usually would do, because we wanted to keep a safe distance, especially since, you know, my grandmother is old, and so are like my aunts and uncles, and, you know. So it did affect that when we couldn't see each other that often. But like I've said before, it's gotten better, and we can do that more often now. But before, it really affected my spirit, because I couldn't get to see any of my family members when I usually would. And when I wanted to celebrate with them and have fun and eat food with them, when I usually would. And when I wanted to celebrate with them and have fun and eat food with them, I couldn't.
Oh yeah, of course. There's something called boon in our culture, where people come over to your house, they drink coffee all together. And there was something called ergob, where people come together to eat food, and then they pay you, and then you go to their house and you pay them back the money. Things like that, you know, very big people. And then there was air train kind of celebration, kind of where people go to and celebrate. We couldn't do any of that because of COVID-19, which wasn't only stressful for me, but for my family too, because they are social people too, you know. In my work, my dad's work is kind of related to that, so he had to work at home all the time. Yeah, so yeah, it was not only stressful for me, it was also stressful for my family. So yeah, it was hard, I'd say.
Well, I noticed too when I did my fundraising thing, all of it was done online.
Yeah.
I didn't have to ever go like do a fundraising performance. I just put everything up together online, and then people gave. And then before COVID, I did a lot of groups. I did a lot of community groups and meeting groups.
Yeah.
And then everything went online. So it's like all of my groups were online, and most of them still are. Like some of them are starting to go back to face-to-face, which feels a lot healthier to me. But yeah, everything went digital, and I was so grateful that I had access to computer, because I know some people didn't, and then I know others that were didn't want to do the online stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm not a techie. I'll admit that right up front. I'm not a techie. So I've never been the Zoom master. I've always been like the co-host, and will share my documents. That's about as far as I get. But hosting it and setting it up and all of that, I asked somebody else to do it, and that's great. They can do it, and that gives them their role and responsibility in the process. But it's really kind of tough, because you got to pull up the right document, and hit the button, and unmute yourself and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas getting to meet people in person, you begin to build a relationship, and you get to know people, even if it's brief, but especially over the past 2 years, those hour and a half, whatever meetings, would have amounted to a lot of, personal time with individuals in the meetings. And then there's the pre-meeting, where you're just kind of sitting around chatting and whatever. And then, some folks, will go out afterwards and, have dinner or whatever afterwards. And, we don't get to do any of that. You click off the Zoom and you go on to the next Zoom. It's just Zoomorama. So.
Well, I did have... Luckily, my school did provide a lot of materials that we needed. Like, before COVID even happened, my school provides laptops. And, for like other classes that need more materials, like science and art, I did get the materials for. But things that my school didn't provide, like Wi-Fi and stuff, I had it, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for the amount of people who were working on their electronics. It wasn't enough to keep a stable connection over Zoom. So there was some struggles on like going online and doing school from my home. But for the most part, I think I'm quite lucky with my school and the amount that they were able to support me and my family.
Well, I would say during that time, I was a junior student, which means I was doing Running Start. So I had a lot of questions, because it was my first time in Running Start. I had a lot of questions. I needed a lot of help, but I didn't get to find this kind of help from people who are professional, like the counselors in the college or counselors in my high school. It was hard to reach them. So I was really stressed about it. Or let's say, because it's a college level classes and I'm in high school, it's my first time, the classes were hard. So it was kind of hard to kind of communicate with the teachers through Zoom and like ask these questions. So it wasn't that as friendly, as comfortable as I was when I was in class in person. And yeah, online classes, since the computers that they gave us was provided by our school, at first it was kind of good, but then the computers wasn't as good, I would say. Sometimes they are so slow, you have to restart them every time. Sometimes they will restart themselves when you are in the middle of the Zoom class. So there were some kind of difficulties like that. So yeah, working online was really hard for me. But also, talking about online classes, because everything was online, the Wi-Fi had to be shared, which was very hard. There is about 7 people in my house, and everyone had to share the Wi-Fi. So I can't imagine how much of problems I was having. Every time I started Zoom, it will stop at some point. So yeah, there were a lot of difficulties, I'll say.
I gained, community, definitely community. I gained more empathy, deeper empathy for myself and also for what other people are going through. I gained more of a bigger awareness of the amount of systemic sickness that's happening in the community, in the world, and that we all have to come together to help heal it. I gained a lesson in humanity, You know, it's like people are basically good. They're basically wise. They're basically kind. They're basically strong. And everyone has inherent goodness. It's like I got even more stronger in that conviction because I saw, I think I gained clarity just to start seeing everything. And it's not all perfect. And it's not right and wrong. There's all these different middle shades, you know. So I think I gained, for me, I want to say like equanimity and more balance and more, I think ultimately more strength, which is interesting because a lot of, you know, there was times when I felt like I was going to go down. I mean, and I gained this, I don't want to sound like religious, but I gained faith.
Same.
I gained a faith in whatever you want to call it, God, the divine, the force of love. That's what's going to get us through.
I think, thinking academically, transitioning from middle school to high school, I think a big resource that I would like in the community is just a place for students to get together and be together with, to work on their academics and collaborate, and just having that space that, you know, people of this same age can be together. I think that would be something that I would want moving into high school. More work I will have, I expect. So having a place to work on my schoolwork.
Well, what I learned from COVID is, what I saw basically, there is a lot of inequality in our community. So if you see people who are immigrants and people who are not, there is a big difference in between them. So we really need to provide our people, we really need to kind of have this equal, everyone has to be treated equally. Everyone has to have that computer, everyone has to have that right internet, everyone has to have that equal treatment, you know. That's what I kind of noticed. Some people are living in such a bad condition when others are living in such a high condition, which was really sad. And coming back to COVID as a health issue, many people believe it was something from God. Many people believed it was something that came up from something. You know, everyone had their own assumptions, but every assumption that they had brings us to one point that we have to be careful, because at the end of the day, from wherever it comes, it's a sickness. It's something that affects our health. So we have to be careful. Some people weren't careful enough because they took it as easy as they want, and that really impacted many people. So yeah, we shouldn't really play with a pandemic or an illness. That's what I kind of learned from COVID-19.
Yeah, and I learned that there's a lot going on in this world, and COVID-19 was just a metaphor for people to come together and wake up more, and that we cannot do this by ourselves. We have to be united to heal what's happening in the world and in the country. I learned that the government, I don't necessarily trust the government, and I healed from the COVID. I healed from like alternative medicine. So I use Chinese medicine and acupuncture, which I thank God for that resource. Because I learned too, the hospitals didn't know that much what to do. They say go home and hope for the best. So thank you so much.
Goodbye.
When the lamp is burning low, from a tear in my eyes, a truth that will not die, it is calling you to your home. In the warmth of your heart, you will feel the fire start, the love it will grow, beyond what you will know. Like a horse running free, its is calling you to your home. Eastern sun, eastern sun, in the heart of everyone. From the morning rising high on the mountain tops on high, sunlight in my eye. Come on in. Eastern sun. Eastern sun. That's a song I'm working on. It's called The Eastern Sun. It's a metaphor for the sun that's constantly rising. The sun is always rising, and that is true. Our hearts are always awake and beating, whether they're happy or sad, and that the Eastern sun is in everybody. It's a metaphor for light and for uplifted energy that the world needs right now to stay connected and to heal our hearts, the heart of humanity.